Sarah Martinez never imagined that her weekend hobby would change her life forever. At 28 years old, she worked as a dental hygienist in a small town outside Phoenix, Arizona. Her days were filled with cleaning teeth, taking X-rays, and listening to patients complain about flossing. But when Saturday morning arrived, Sarah transformed into someone completely different. Every weekend, she drove her beat-up Honda Civic to the local shooting range. Not to practice her aim, but to collect something most people threw away without a second thought. Sarah collected spent brass casings. While other shooters focused on hitting targets, she wandered the range with a small bucket, picking up the golden shell casings that littered the ground like metallic confetti. Her collection had started 3 years earlier when her grandfather passed away and left her his old reloading equipment. Miguel Martinez had been a veteran of the Korean War, and he taught Sarah that ammunition was expensive, but brass casings could be reloaded dozens of times if you knew what you were doing. What began as a way to save money on ammunition became an obsession with the art of precision reloading. Sarah's garage had been converted into a workshop that would make any ammunition manufacturer jealous. Shelves lined the walls, filled with sorted brass casings organized by caliber, manufacturer, and number of times fired. She had brass from .22 caliber all the way up to .50 caliber, each sorted into labeled containers with the precision of a pharmacy. Her reloading bench occupied the center of the garage, complete with a progressive press, powder measure, and digital scale that could measure gunpowder to the 10th of a grain. Most people at the range knew Sarah as the quiet woman who showed up early and stayed late, always carrying her collection bucket. She rarely shot more than a box of ammunition, but she could spend hours examining brass casings under a magnifying glass, checking for cracks, measuring case length, and determining which ones were suitable for reloading. The other shooters thought she was eccentric, but they appreciated that she helped keep the range clean. On this particular Saturday morning in October, Sarah arrived at Copper Canyon shooting range just as the sun was painting the desert landscape in shades of gold and orange. The air was crisp and still, perfect conditions for long-range shooting. She noticed several military vehicles in the parking lot and wondered if the local National Guard unit was training today. As she walked toward her usual spot at the 100-yard line, Sarah heard the distinctive crack of high-powered rifles coming from the far end of the range. She looked toward the 1,000-yard line and saw a group of men in military fatigues setting up what appeared to be some serious equipment. Their rifles looked nothing like the hunting rifles and sporting guns she was used to seeing. Sarah set up her small shooting station and began her usual routine. She loaded 10 rounds of her carefully crafted handloads into her grandfather's old Remington 700. The rifle had been modified over the years with a heavy barrel and a high-quality scope, transforming it from a basic hunting rifle into a precision instrument. Each cartridge she loaded contained exactly 42.5 grains of Varget powder, topped with a 168-grain Sierra Match King bullet, seated to an overall length of 2.8 inches. As she fired her first group, Sarah noticed one of the military men walking in her direction. He was tall and lean, with the confident bearing of someone accustomed to being in charge. His uniform bore the insignia of a master sergeant, and various patches indicated he was special forces. Sarah continued shooting, trying to ignore his approach, but she could feel him watching her. After firing her 10th shot, Sarah set down her rifle and walked downrange to check her target. At 100 yards, her group measured just under half an inch, with 9 shots forming a tight cluster and 1 shot opening the group slightly. It was good shooting, but not exceptional by precision standards. When she returned to the firing line, the soldier was examining her reloading setup with obvious interest. He introduced himself as Master Sergeant David Chen, and he complimented her on the organization of her equipment. Sarah thanked him politely, but remained focused on her brass collection duties. Master Sergeant Chen explained that his team was conducting long-range marksmanship training, preparing for an upcoming deployment. He mentioned that they were working at distances most civilian shooters never attempted, and that precision reloading was crucial at those ranges. Sarah nodded politely, assuming this was just military small talk. As the morning progressed, Sarah collected brass from around the 100 and 200-yard lines, while occasionally glancing toward the military team at the far end of the range. She could see them taking turns behind massive rifles mounted on bipods, with spotters calling wind conditions and range corrections. The sound of their rifles was different from anything she had heard before. A sharp crack followed by the distinctive whistle of bullets traveling at extremely high velocity. During a break in their training, Master Sergeant Chen approached Sarah again. This time, he seemed more curious about her shooting rather than her reloading equipment. He asked about her rifle, her ammunition, and her shooting background. Sarah explained that she was largely self-taught, learning from her grandfather's old reloading manuals and endless experimentation with different powder charges and bullet seating depths. Chen seemed impressed by her methodical approach to ammunition development. He mentioned that many military snipers spent years learning the same lessons she had taught herself through careful observation and record-keeping. Sarah felt a flush of pride, but remained modest about her abilities. As the conversation continued, Chen revealed that his team was struggling with consistency at extreme ranges. They had military-issued ammunition, but it wasn't performing as well as they needed for their training standards. He asked if Sarah had ever considered shooting at distances beyond 200 yards, and she admitted that her range only went out to 300 yards, and she had never felt the need to shoot further. Chen's expression changed to one of genuine curiosity. He explained that precision shooting at long range was as much about understanding ballistics and environmental conditions as it was about marksmanship. The skills Sarah demonstrated in her ammunition preparation suggested she might have a natural aptitude for the kind of shooting his team practiced. Before leaving, Chen extended an invitation that would change Sarah's life. He asked if she would be interested in observing their training session and perhaps trying a shot or two at their 1,000-yard targets. Sarah's first instinct was to decline, feeling intimidated by the professional military environment. But something in Chen's tone suggested he was genuinely interested in her potential rather than just being polite. Sarah spent the rest of the morning collecting brass and thinking about Chen's invitation. She had always been curious about long-range shooting, but it seemed like something beyond her capabilities. Her grandfather had been an excellent marksman, but his stories were from a different era, when combat ranges were measured in hundreds of yards rather than thousands. As she drove home that afternoon, Sarah's mind raced with possibilities. She had spent years perfecting her reloading techniques, but she had never tested them at distances where those small improvements would really matter. The idea of shooting at 1,000 yards seemed both terrifying and exciting. That evening, Sarah researched long-range shooting online, reading about ballistic coefficients, wind drift calculations, and the equipment used by competitive shooters and military snipers. She discovered that successful long-range shooting required not just good marksmanship, but a deep understanding of external ballistics, environmental conditions, and equipment capabilities. The more she read, the more she realized that her methodical approach to reloading had given her a foundation that many shooters lacked. She understood the importance of consistency in ammunition preparation, and she had the tools and knowledge to develop loads specifically for long-range applications. By Sunday morning, Sarah had made her decision. She would return to the range and accept Master Sergeant Chen's invitation, not because she expected to be successful, but because she was curious about how far her skills could take her. She spent the morning preparing a new batch of ammunition, using her most precise techniques and her best components. As she loaded each cartridge, Sarah thought about her grandfather and the lessons he had taught her about patience, precision, and respect for the craft of marksmanship. Miguel Martinez had always said that shooting was about more than hitting targets. It was about understanding your equipment, respecting your limitations, and constantly striving to improve. Sarah packed her rifle, her carefully prepared ammunition, and her brass collection bucket. She had no idea that this decision would lead to an encounter that would test everything she thought she knew about her abilities and set her on a path she never could have imagined. The following Saturday arrived with unseasonably calm conditions for October in Arizona. Sarah woke before dawn, her stomach tight with nervous energy. She had spent the week reading everything she could find about long-range shooting, studying ballistic tables, and preparing ammunition with even greater care than usual. Her grandfather's old rifle had been cleaned and inspected multiple times, and she had loaded 50 rounds using her most consistent techniques. At the shooting range, Sarah found Master Sergeant Chen's team already set up at the 1,000-yard line. Their equipment looked even more impressive. In the morning light, she counted 4 rifles, each one a precision instrument that probably cost more than her annual salary. Massive scopes topped each rifle, and various electronic devices were scattered across their shooting positions. Chen greeted Sarah with obvious pleasure and introduced her to his team. Staff Sergeant Mike Rodriguez was the team's primary sniper, a compact man with intense eyes who had apparently been shooting competitively since high school. Sergeant First Class Jason Wright handled spotting duties and ballistic calculations, carrying a tablet computer loaded with ballistic software and environmental monitoring equipment. Private First Class Tommy Kim rounded out the team as their communications specialist and backup shooter. The team was preparing for deployment to Afghanistan, where they would need to engage targets at distances that pushed the limits of their equipment and training. Chen explained that while they had access to excellent military equipment, they were always looking for ways to improve their ammunition performance through hand-loading techniques. Sarah watched as Rodriguez took his position behind his rifle, a custom-built platform chambered in .338 Lapua Magnum. Wright called out environmental conditions from his spotting scope and tablet computer, providing information about temperature, humidity, barometric pressure, and wind conditions at multiple points downrange. The level of technical sophistication impressed Sarah, but she also noticed similarities to her own methodical approach to shooting. Rodriguez fired a 3-shot group at a target 1,000 yards away, with Wright providing real-time feedback about bullet impact and wind conditions. Through the team's spotting scope, Sarah could see that the shots formed a group roughly 6 inches across, which seemed impossibly precise to someone accustomed to shooting at 100 yards. Chen invited Sarah to look through the spotting scope to better understand the challenges of long-range shooting. At 1,000 yards, the target appeared tiny, and Sarah could see heat waves rising from the desert floor that would affect bullet flight. Wind flags placed at intervals along the range showed varying conditions, with different directions and velocities at different ranges. Wright explained how they used their ballistic computer to account for all these variables. He showed Sarah how they entered information about their ammunition, rifle characteristics, and environmental conditions, then received firing solutions that told them exactly how much to adjust their scope for each shot. The technology was impressive, but Sarah noticed that it still required precise, consistent ammunition to work properly. After observing several more shooting strings, Chen asked Sarah if she would like to try shooting at 600 yards using her own rifle and ammunition. 600 yards was beyond anything Sarah had attempted, but it seemed like a reasonable intermediate step toward understanding long-range shooting principles. Wright helped Sarah calculate a basic firing solution using his ballistic software. He entered the specifications for her. 308 Winchester ammunition, estimated the ballistic coefficient of her 168-grain bullets, and provided an elevation adjustment for 600 yards. Sarah dialed the adjustment into her scope with hands that trembled slightly from nervousness. Taking her position behind her grandfather's old Remington, Sarah tried to apply everything she had observed about long-range shooting technique. She focused on maintaining consistent cheek weld and eye position, controlling her breathing, and following through with each shot. The target at 600 yards was barely visible through her scope, requiring her to trust her adjustments and focus on technique rather than trying to aim precisely. Her first shot kicked up dirt several feet below the target, indicating her initial elevation setting was insufficient. Wright spotted the impact and provided a correction, which Sarah dialed into her scope. Her second shot struck the target near the bottom edge, drawing approving comments from the military team. Over the next hour, Sarah fired 20 rounds at 600 yards, gradually improving her understanding of how environmental conditions affected bullet flight. Wright continued to provide coaching and spotting assistance, teaching her to read wind conditions and make appropriate adjustments. By her final shots, Sarah was consistently hitting the target, though her groups were much larger than what she was accustomed to at shorter ranges. Chen complimented Sarah on her rapid improvement and her willingness to learn. He mentioned that many experienced shooters struggled with the transition to long-range shooting because they had to abandon some of their assumptions about marksmanship. Sarah's lack of bad habits from shorter-range shooting actually worked in her favor. During a lunch break, the conversation turned to the challenges of ammunition consistency at extreme ranges. Rodriguez explained that at 1,000 yards and beyond, small variations in ammunition performance became magnified dramatically. A variation in muzzle velocity of just 20 feet per second could result in several inches of vertical dispersion at long range. Sarah described her reloading techniques, explaining how she sorted brass by manufacturer and number of firings, how she measured powder charges to the tenth of a grain, and how she used a comparator to ensure consistent bullet seating depth. The military team was impressed by her attention to detail, noting that her techniques were more precise than what many military snipers employed. Wright mentioned that they had been experimenting with hand-loading to improve their long-range performance, but they lacked access to some of the precision equipment that Sarah used routinely. Military ammunition was manufactured to excellent standards, but it was produced for consistency across different rifles rather than optimized for any specific weapon. As the afternoon training session began, Chen made an unexpected suggestion. He proposed that Sarah try shooting at 1,000 yards using one of their rifles, with Wright providing spotting and coaching support. The idea terrified and excited Sarah in equal measure, but she found herself agreeing before she had time to think about all the ways it could go wrong. Rodriguez's 338 Lapua rifle felt completely different from Sarah's familiar Remington. The rifle was heavier, the trigger was lighter and crisper, and the massive scope provided much more magnification than she was accustomed to. Wright spent several minutes explaining the scope's features and helping Sarah achieve proper eye alignment and cheek weld. The 1,000-yard target looked impossibly small through the scope, even at high magnification. Wright provided Sarah with a complete firing solution, including elevation and windage adjustments based on current conditions. He explained each step of the process, helping Sarah understand how environmental factors translated into scope adjustments. Sarah's first shot at 1,000 yards missed the target completely, kicking up a small dust cloud in the hillside beyond. Wright spotted the impact and provided corrections, explaining how the missed shot actually provided valuable information about current wind conditions. Sarah made the suggested adjustments and prepared for her second attempt. Her second shot struck the target near the left edge, producing an audible impact that carried clearly across the range. The military team erupted in congratulations, impressed that Sarah had managed to hit the target on only her second attempt at extreme range. For Sarah, the successful hit felt surreal, like she had accomplished something beyond her capabilities. Wright encouraged Sarah to fire additional shots, using each impact to refine her understanding of the wind conditions and her hold on the target. Over the next 10 shots, Sarah's accuracy improved dramatically as she learned to read the environmental conditions and trust her adjustments. By her final shot of the afternoon, Sarah was consistently hitting within a few inches of her point of aim at 1,000 yards. The military team was genuinely impressed, noting that many experienced shooters required weeks or months of training to achieve comparable accuracy at that distance. As the team packed up their equipment, Rodriguez made a casual comment that would prove prophetic. He mentioned that the range had targets at distances beyond 1,000 yards, including one at exactly 3,294 meters that was used for extreme long-range training. The target had been placed there as a challenge for visiting military units, and very few shooters had ever managed to hit it consistently. Chen laughed and suggested that if Sarah continued improving at her current rate, she might be able to hit that target within a few months of training. Rodriguez disagreed, betting that even with extensive training, civilian equipment, and hand-loaded ammunition, hitting a target at 3,294 meters was beyond Sarah's capabilities. The bet was made casually, almost as a joke, but Sarah noticed the way Chen's expression changed when Rodriguez issued the challenge. 3,294 meters was over 2 miles, a distance that pushed the limits of even military-grade equipment and ammunition. Successfully hitting a target at that range required not just marksmanship skill, but mastery of ballistics, environmental conditions, and equipment capabilities. As Sarah drove home that evening, her mind raced with the implications of Rodriguez's challenge. Part of her knew that attempting to hit a target at 3,294 meters was probably beyond her reach, regardless of how much time and effort she invested. But another part of her was already calculating what it would take to have even a chance of success. She thought about her grandfather and his approach to seemingly impossible challenges. Miguel Martinez had always believed that careful preparation and methodical practice could overcome almost any obstacle. He had taught Sarah that the difference between success and failure often came down to attention to details that other people overlooked. That night, Sarah began researching extreme long-range shooting, learning about the equipment, ammunition, and techniques used by world record holders and military snipers. The more she read, the more she realized that Rodriguez's challenge would require her to push every aspect of her shooting to levels she had never imagined. But for the first time in years, Sarah felt truly excited about a challenge. She had spent so long focused on the technical aspects of reloading that she had forgotten the thrill of testing her limits. Rodriguez's bet had awakened something in her, a desire to discover just how far her combination of precision reloading and methodical practice could take her. The brass collector was about to become something much more ambitious. The next 8 months transformed Sarah Martinez from a weekend hobbyist into something approaching a professional long-range shooter. What started as curiosity about Rodriguez's challenge became an all-consuming pursuit that restructured her entire life around the goal of hitting a target at 3,294 meters. Sarah's first realization was that her grandfather's Remington 700, despite its modifications, was insufficient for extreme long-range work. After extensive research and some painful calculations involving her dental hygienist's salary, she invested in a custom-built rifle chambered in .338 Lapua Magnum. The rifle featured a heavy barrel, precision-bedded action, and a scope that cost more than her car. Her garage workshop expanded to accommodate the demands of extreme precision ammunition. Sarah added a concrete bench to eliminate vibration during powder weighing, installed better lighting for visual inspection of cases and bullets, and acquired measuring instruments that could detect variations invisible to her previous equipment. Every aspect of her reloading process was refined to eliminate potential sources of inconsistency. The ammunition development process alone consumed 3 months. Sarah tested dozens of powder and bullet combinations, chronographing every load to measure velocity, consistency, and tracking accuracy at progressively longer ranges. She learned to sort bullets by weight and bearing surface length, selecting only the most uniform projectiles for her precision loads. Her record-keeping became obsessively detailed, with environmental conditions, velocity measurements, and accuracy data recorded for every shot fired. Chen's team provided invaluable assistance throughout this process. Wright shared his ballistic software and helped Sarah understand how small ammunition variations affected performance at extreme ranges. Rodriguez, despite his skepticism about Sarah's chances, provided honest feedback about her equipment choices and shooting technique. Their deployment to Afghanistan had been delayed, giving them time to observe Sarah's remarkable progress. By spring, Sarah was consistently hitting targets at 1,500 meters using her new rifle and carefully developed ammunition. Her groups at that distance measured less than 10 inches, performance that impressed even Rodriguez. But 1,500 meters was still less than half the distance to Rodriguez's challenge target. The transition from 1,500 to 2,000 meters proved more difficult than Sarah anticipated. Environmental factors that were manageable at shorter ranges became dominant influences on bullet flight. Wind conditions varied significantly over the extended flight path, requiring Sarah to develop an intuitive understanding of how air movement at different ranges affected her shots. Temperature and humidity changes throughout the day meant that firing solutions calculated in the morning were useless by afternoon. Sarah learned to constantly monitor environmental conditions and adjust her approach accordingly. She began arriving at the range before sunrise and staying until sunset, shooting under different conditions to understand how they affected her ammunition performance. The ballistic challenges at extreme range pushed Sarah's ammunition development to new levels of precision. Variations in bullet weight that were irrelevant at 300 yards became critical factors at 2,000 meters. She began weighing individual bullets and sorting them into groups that varied by less than 1/10 of a grain. Similarly, her powder charges were measured to tolerances that seemed obsessive even by precision reloading standards. Sarah's shooting technique evolved dramatically during this period. The fundamental marksmanship principles remained the same, but their application at extreme range required much greater consistency. Her natural breathing rhythm, trigger control, and follow-through had to be refined until they became completely automatic. Any variation in her shooting position or technique resulted in misses measured in feet rather than inches. Wright helped Sarah understand the importance of reading environmental conditions across the entire bullet flight path. They spent hours studying wind flags, mirage patterns, and vegetation movement at different ranges. Learning to estimate wind speed and direction at multiple points along the bullet's trajectory, Sarah discovered that successful extreme long-range shooting required as much meteorology knowledge as marksmanship skill. By early summer, Sarah was hitting targets consistently at 2,500 meters, a distance that amazed everyone who witnessed her shooting. Local news media learned about her pursuit and began following her progress, fascinated by the story of a dental hygienist attempting to achieve shooting performance that rivaled military snipers. The attention made Sarah uncomfortable, but it also brought unexpected benefits. A local precision rifle manufacturer offered to sponsor her equipment needs, providing access to components and expertise that accelerated her progress. A ballistic software company became interested in her data, using her shooting results to validate their extreme range calculations. Rodriguez's skepticism gradually transformed into genuine respect as Sarah's capabilities became undeniable. His original bet had been made casually, but Sarah's dedication and rapid improvement forced him to acknowledge that she might actually achieve what initially seemed impossible. The final push to 3,294 meters required Sarah to address challenges that had no easy solutions. At that distance, the bullet would be in flight for nearly 4 seconds, traveling through air layers with potentially different temperatures, humidity levels, and wind conditions. Small errors in environmental assessment or ammunition consistency could result in misses by dozens of feet. Sarah's ammunition for the final attempt represented the culmination of months of development work. Each cartridge was loaded with components, selected from batches tested for uniformity. Bullets were sorted by weight, bearing surface, and even visual inspection under magnification. Powder charges were measured using a laboratory-grade balance, and cartridge overall length was controlled to within thousandths of an inch. The morning of the attempt arrived with nearly perfect conditions. The air was still, with minimal wind and stable temperature. Sarah had monitored weather forecasts for weeks, waiting for conditions that would give her the best possible chance of success. Chen's team assembled to witness the attempt, along with range officials who would verify any hits on the distant target. Rodriguez seemed genuinely nervous, perhaps realizing that his casual bet might be about to cost him considerable money and pride. Sarah's first shot missed the target, impacting in the hillside beyond with a dust cloud that took several seconds to become visible. Wright provided detailed feedback about the miss, helping Sarah adjust her hold and environmental corrections. Her second shot also missed, but closer to the target. The third shot struck the target with an audible impact that carried clearly across the range despite the distance. Sarah's careful preparation, months of practice, and precise ammunition had combined to achieve what many considered impossible. The assembled observers erupted in celebration, but Sarah remained focused on the task at hand. Rodriguez's challenge had specified hitting the target, not just achieving one lucky shot. Sarah fired 5 more rounds, hitting the target 3 additional times out of her remaining attempts. Her success rate at 3,294 meters exceeded what many military snipers achieved at half that distance. The implications of Sarah's achievement extended far beyond winning Rodriguez's bet. She had demonstrated that civilian shooters, with sufficient dedication and proper equipment, could achieve extreme long-range performance that rivaled military capabilities. Her methodical approach to ammunition development and environmental assessment became a model for other precision shooters. Local media coverage of Sarah's achievement brought national attention to her story. She received invitations to demonstrate her shooting at precision rifle competitions and military training events. Equipment manufacturers sought her endorsement, recognizing that her success validated their products at the extreme edge of performance. Rodriguez paid his bet gracefully, admitting that Sarah's achievement had exceeded his expectations and challenged his assumptions about civilian shooting capabilities. Chen nominated Sarah for recognition by military precision shooting organizations, acknowledging her contribution to advancing extreme long-range techniques. Sarah's garage workshop became a destination for visiting shooters seeking to understand her ammunition development techniques. She shared her methods freely, believing that advancing the art of precision shooting benefited everyone in the community. Her detailed records and methodical approach influenced ammunition development practices throughout the precision shooting world. The success at 3,294 meters marked the beginning, rather than the end, of Sarah's involvement in extreme, long-range shooting. She continued developing new techniques and equipment, pushing the boundaries of what civilian shooters could achieve. Her brass collection hobby had evolved into expertise that commanded respect from military and civilian shooters alike. Years later, when people asked Sarah how she managed to hit a target at over 2 miles using civilian equipment, she always credited her grandfather's lessons about patience, precision, and respect for the craft. Miguel Martinez had taught her that careful preparation could overcome seemingly impossible challenges, and that attention to details others overlooked often made the difference between success and failure. Sarah's achievement demonstrated that extraordinary performance was possible when technical knowledge, careful preparation, and dedicated practice combined with the right opportunity. Her story became legend among precision shooters, proof that passion and methodical approach could triumph over skepticism and conventional limitations. The brass collector had become one of the most accomplished extreme long-range shooters in the world, all because she was willing to accept a challenge that others considered impossible.